Hello and welcome back as we continue reading the Bible Jesus Read by Philip Yancey. And hopefully you've been really enjoying it. We're in the chapter on Psalms, spirituality in every key. And this section is called Soul Therapy. So if you need some soul therapy, sit down, relax, and enjoy the book. Here we go. The Psalms give me a model of spiritual therapy. I once wrote a book titled Disappointment with God. And my publishers initially worried over the title, proposing instead Overcoming Disappointment with God. It seemed faintly heretical to introduce a book with a negative title into Christian bookstores filled with books on the marvelous Christian life. In the process of writing the book, however, I found that the Bible includes detailed accounts of people sorely disappointed with God. To put it mildly, not only Job and Moses have it out with God, so do Habakkuk, Jeremiah, and many of the unnamed psalmists. Some psalms merit titles like Furious with God, Betrayed by God, Abandoned by God, In Despair about God. Considering a few lines from Psalm 89. Oh, how long, O Lord, will you hide yourself forever? How long will your wrath burn like fire? For what futility you have created all men. Or these sentiments found in Psalm 88. Why, O Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? The darkness is my closest friend. It may seem strange for sacred writers to include such scenes of spiritual failure, but actually their inclusion reflects an important principle of therapy. A marriage therapist will often warn new clients, your relationship may get worse before it gets better. Grudges and resentments that have been buried for years may resurface. Misunderstandings must be nakedly exposed before true understandings can begin to flourish. Indeed, the Psalms, like psychoanalysis, may help uncover neurotic elements in us. Kathleen Norris writes of a Catholic sister who counsels troubled women, displaced homemakers, abused wives, women returning to college after years away, and finds that Psalms offers a helpful pattern of expressing rage that the church often tries to repress. Bear it up, keep smiling, suffering makes you strong, say some spiritual advisors, but not the psalmists. They do not rationalize anger away or give abstract advice about pain. Rather, they express emotions vividly and loudly, directing their feelings primarily at God. The 150 Psalms present a mosaic of spiritual therapy and process. Doubt, paranoia, giddiness, meanness, delight, hatred, joy, praise, vengefulness, betrayal. You can find it all in Psalms. Such strewing of emotions, which I once saw as hopeless disarray, I now see as a sign of health. From Psalms, I have learned that I can rightfully bring to God whatever I feel about Him. I need not paper over my failures and try to clean up my own rottenness. Far better to bring those weaknesses to God, who alone has the power to heal. No psalm demonstrates healing power better than Psalm 51. Credited to David after his sordid affair with Bathsheba. You can see that in 2 Samuel 11 and 12. Even though he had committed murder and adultery, David recognized that in the final analysis, against you, God, you alone have I sinned. Although he had nothing to offer God but a broken spirit and a contrite heart, that very admission led him down the path toward healing. David confessed in tears and grief, and the psalm became a public guide for others' confession. Walter Brueggemann has coined the term Psalms of Disorientation to describe those psalms that express confusion, confession, and doubt. Typically, the writer begins by begging God to rescue him from his desperate straits. He may weave poetic images of how he has been wronged, appeal to God's sense of justice, even taunt God. What good can I do you when I'm dead? How can I praise you then? The very act of venting those feelings allows the author to attain a better perspective. He reflects on better times, remembers answered prayers of the past, concedes favors that he may have overlooked. By the end of the psalm, he moves toward praise and thanksgiving. He feels heard and cleansed. The psalm, or prayer, works out transformation. Psalm 71 gives an example of how the spiritual reality therapy may work. The stanzas move from urgent pleas for God's help to tentative declarations of faith to new fears for the future. And by the end, the poet is praising God for his faithfulness, forced memory of God's miracles for Israel, and God's past intimacy in his own life has put to rest for the present some of the poet's fundamental doubts. Many psalms convey this spirit of, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, a way of talking oneself into faith when emotions are wavering. And the odd mixture of psalms of cursing, psalms of praise, and psalms of confession no longer jars me as it once did. Instead, I am continually amazed by the spiritual wholeness of the Hebrew poets, who sought to include God in every area of activity. One need not dress up or put on a face or to meet God. There are no walled off areas. God can be trusted with reality. For the Hebrew poets, God represented a reality more solid than their own whipsaw emotions or the checkered history of their people. They wrestled with God over every facet of their lives, and in the end it was a very act of wrestling that proved their faith. I have a friend, Harold Fickett, who retires for days at a time to a nearby monastery. Many monastic orders recite the Psalms morning, noon, and evening. It takes them several weeks to go through the entire cycle, at which point they begin again with Psalm 1. Now there's a little footnote. It says, until recently, the Roman Catholic priest who said the divine office from his breviary went through all the Psalms once a week. The Anglican liturgy takes a month to make it through all 150. Historian Paul Johnson mentions Psalms as one of the great unifiers of Christian history. Benedictines and Puritans, Luther and Xavier, Wesley and Newman and Calvin all loved and continually recited the Psalms. All right, back to the text. Harold tells me that sometimes his voice is describing coming into the Lord's gate with thanksgiving, while his mind is replaying some offensive remark he heard yesterday, or wondering when the fog will lift from San Francisco Bay. Day by day, he picks up the rhythm of the Psalms, not all applied to his current spiritual state. Gradually, though, he enters into the reality conveyed in the Psalms, rather than trying to force them into his own mundane world. Reflecting on his time with the monks, Harold wrote that the Psalms supply me with the words that I need and sometimes want to say to my God, words that celebrate his reality. The heavens declare the glory of God, words that confess his action in my life. You have turned my mourning into dancing, words that express my utter dependence. In my mother's womb you formed me, words that convey my hoped for intimacy. This one thing I desire, that I might dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Psalms tutor my soul in my love for my God. And that's where we're going to end this week. Pretty brief, I know, but I think that it's a good stopping place, and we'll pick up next week as we continue our read-through of the Bible that Jesus read by Philip Yancey. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.